Every day business is a big day. Like Comcast Business helping move forward with what's next. Our phone lines are having problems, so we're calling Andrew through the bat phone.
Well, I think he still has a home phone, one of those ones that sits on an end table.
What's up, Andrew? From Inside the Birds in 97.5 The Fanatic. What's going on, brother?
What's going on, guys? No, I don't have a home line, but to add to your conversation, guys, Isaiah Rodgers has the key to the city March 7th.
Well, that's what we were talking about. That's what started all this. We're trying to figure out who gets keys to the cities.
I'm floored.
And John Kincade did not get one from Atlanta. Nobody in Atlanta has gotten the key to the city.
My brother served served that city for, I think, 28 years.
Yeah, well.
I'm just shocked at this.
You got a bone to pick with them, John.
I do. I really do.
Andrew, I
would have bet against it.
It is Combine Week. Oh, my God, you and this damn betting thing. It is Combine Week. I know it started yesterday. Has there been anyone that has popped off that makes sense for the Eagles? Obviously, Abdul Carter is a big name that people are going to keep an eye on, but he's going early. So who are some of the guys that you've been paying attention to from afar that the Eagles could be targeting in the first round of the NFL draft?
Jahad Campbell, the linebacker from Alabama. Now, the Eagles aren't likely to take a linebacker in the first round, but that pick 32 is essentially a second-round pick, as you guys know. But, man, his ability to move fluidly in space, and I just think he has a lot of power to his game, and he's a really smart player. I love what I saw from him on tape, and then he kind of confirmed what I'd seen and then goes out there and tests the way that he did. Obviously, James Pierce, the edge rusher from Miami, he ran a 4.47, guys. He's 6'5". Our Eagles aren't likely to get him, but that might be a player that if you're Howie Roseman and you need an edge rusher, which you do, you find a way to maybe trade up and because obviously when you see a player that runs that fast, everybody automatically thinks they go in the top 10. That's not always the case. That's factored into the equation, but it's not all of a sudden that they're this blue chip prospect that nobody's going to be able to get. So he had some really enticing characteristics, moved really well, explosive. Those are the kind of players that Howie Roseman and the Eagles really like when they look at that position.
Did you know Jalix Hunt a year ago today?
Yes.
Okay, because that's what I'm wondering. That's what I'm wondering about. Is somebody going to jump onto your radar that you're going to, in the next, week, that is all of a sudden going to be something that we're all going to know about?
Yeah, I think it's possible. I think you could see a small school player that they really take advantage of their opportunity. But for Jalix Hunt, it's not exactly like he came out of nowhere from an NFL perspective because he was invited to the scouting combine. He was also at the Senior Bowl, and he performed really well at both events. So that's a player that had the arrow trending up going into, pro days and going into 30 visits and things like that. But, yeah, there's always a player or two, John, that really sticks out. I mean, thinking off the top of my head, we talk about running backs. Marcus Yarns from Delaware is a player who I think is going to run in the high 4.3s and jump a 40-inch vertical at just 5'11", 195. So that's a player that I think is going to be on a lot more people's radars by the end of the weekend.
How do you handle a draft if you're in the Philadelphia Eagles situation where you're coming off a Super Bowl title, and let's face it, you look across the board, you're bringing back the majority of your starters, and for the starters that will leave, you have guys already in place that can fill in, like Tyler Steen at right guard. So when you're going into this draft, are you looking at key areas that need depth? Are you thinking about starting spots 2-3 years from now? How do you handle this draft if you're Howie Roseman?
I think it's simply just best player available. And if that best player happens to be a corner, knowing you just took Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, I think you do that, and you worry about where they fit later on. But I just think that the Eagles and Howie Roseman, he's doubled down on his being adamant about playing younger players. So they're just going to continue to keep taking younger players at top positions, whether that be on the defensive line, at corner, two positions that they really prioritize, offensive line, of course. If they're there, they're going to take them. And I don't think that they're going to think twice about it, regardless of where they fit, where the depth lies on the roster right now. They're just going to continue to take the best player available.
You read anything into Josh Sweat and his tweet where he answered that Josh Sweat's expected to leave Philly, and he gives the really, like sort of like the really. Yeah. What do you think about that? Is there anybody that you think we're all assuming is gone that might not be gone?
That's a great question, John, because I saw that too, and it was almost like, you guys know something that I don't know? That was kind of what I took from that.
That's what I do too.
I just have a hard time envisioning the Eagles being able to spend what Josh Sweat's likely going to command on the open market. He obviously had spurts where he went radio silent. I just think that they may want a more consistent player, a younger player, and someone who doesn't have. Remember, he had a really serious knee injury in his high school years, so that kind of, it makes it a little bit questionable when you look at his long-term viability. But I don't think Josh Sweat's coming back. I just don't think that maybe he's given that consideration. But I think this is the draft here where the Eagles are going to look to add a player at that position in the first or second round. Is there a player that might come back that we're not talking about? I mean, right behind Zach Vaughn, Mekhi Becton would be the first player that comes to mind for me, but he's really lobbied more or less to stay in Philadelphia. It takes two to tango, though.
How close of an eye will the Eagles have? I know they're going to be paying attention to everybody, and you mentioned best player available, but how close of an eye will they be paying attention to maybe right tackles and tight ends throughout the combine? Because at some point you're going to have to start thinking about what's next after Lane Johnson and what's next after Dallas Goedert.
Yeah, that's a great question, Andrew. So in round one, towards the end of round one, there's a player named Josh Simmons from Ohio State and Josh Connerly from Oregon, two tackles that don't necessarily have the length that you would expect from a left tackle. But I think that they can be plug-and-play guys at right tackle. Obviously, Lane Johnson still has a couple of years left. But this feels like a spot where if the player's there and they really like the player and they trust their evaluation, they're probably going to address that sooner than later. You saw what they did with Cam Jurgens. It would make a lot of sense for them to do that. And then for tight end, look, there's a few tight ends that you guys should all be circling to keep an eye on. Mason Taylor from LSU. He's one of my favorite players in this class. Gunnar Helm from Texas. That's another one to keep an eye on. And one who I actually mocked to the Eagles at 96 in my 1.0 mock draft, Terrence Ferguson from Oregon. 6'6", 255, good blocker. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Dallas Goedert.
Is it the idea of Dallas Goedert? I heard NFL Live talking about that movement of guys like of his. He was one of the guys mentioned. Maybe at best case scenario, a fourth rounder, fifth rounder. That seems high to me. With a guy with only 1 year left in his contract, if they decided to move on from Dallas.
Yeah, I think a fifth rounder might sound about right. But if you're the Eagles, I don't really know if you're in position to move off of a player like that, considering
for
that
a fifth-round pick.
Right.
Is also in the final year of his deal. E.J. Jenkins is behind him, but beyond that, guys, they don't have really anybody there. So that's not a position that I think they can afford to move off of a proven player. Maybe you try to get him to restructure, but it wouldn't make a ton of sense from my vantage point anyway for them to try to put him on the trade block.
All right, you mentioned mock draft 1.0. How many mock drafts does Andrew DiCecco put out there before the draft?
I don't do 17. I do like 3 or 4. I try to just educate and educate the audience. I don't need to go all the way to 11 or 12 because then I think it really loses its effectiveness.
Well, you know why some people do it. Okay. It's so that they can say, I was right about this player.
Remember I told you about it?
In mock draft 7.0, I had this player going to this team. Ignore mock drafts 1 through 6. 7.0, I had that one right.
It's ridiculous. If you keep switching it up, you're bound to get something right. And if I told you in my 5th mock draft I had that player. No, I don't. You guys know I don't operate that way.
That's why yours mock draft is the only mock draft I will read from now until the draft.
Andrew is anti-mock draft, but not when it's by DiCecco.
No, exactly. That's the only mock draft I read. Listen, brother, I can't wait for next week. Johnny is out all next week. You're going to be with me, Thursday?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for checking out our content on the 97.5 The Fanatic YouTube channel. Hope you enjoyed the video. And remember, you can always be checking the playlist. There may be something you missed from one of our shows during the day that you want to go back and check out. So every time you like a video, like it, subscribe to the channel, and you'll have that great content coming to you every single day. You're greatly appreciated.